This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, and we're back now inside the Arizona State University Wrestling Room with Arizona State University Hall of Famer, UFC Hall of Famer, Dan the Beast Severn. How is this room compared to the wrestling room that you used to train in?
Light years ahead. Um, Back when I was at Arizona State, it was big enough for really about 2 full mats. And when you see behind me, I think they got a total of three. I think there's like 4 mats out here. Then when you look at the other toys that they have inside here of treadmills and exercise equipment, it's a one-stop shop.
Did you do much weight training back in your time at Arizona State?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you look at my freshman year, I invested everything into. I was already a high-level high school wrestler. Moving on to a Division I college, I wanted to see how would I do as a Division I college wrestler. So I invested, especially my first semester. I took a nutrition class so that I knew that everything I was eating would make me into that ultimate wrestler. I took a nutrition class so that I knew everything I put in my body was going to make me perform to the best of my capability. I took a weightlifting class so I could design weightlifting programs for wrestling. So, I mean, I did a lot of things, and it all paid off for me.
Rerunning Place wants to know, how was wrestling in the ZOWA live promotion?
In the what?
ZOA Live? Do you remember them?
Oh, no, okay, Zoa, okay. I mean, again, I say it like that because I've wrestled for so many different promotions. I'll say that on the independent scene, I've been treated really very well by almost all the promotions. Um, they're a little sketchy when they first wanted to work with me because they've never worked with me before. And then after they have had the experience, they all want to do it again because I simply say what I'm going to do and then I do what I just said. And that's kind of like a very novel thing when it comes to professional wrestling.
McEvoy Productions wants to know how you got along with Steve Austin.
I mean, I really never interacted with Steve. I said I probably had more conversation with him in like the last past year than I had in the entire time. He was, he was one of the top reigning talents. So he was preoccupied a great deal doing other things. So our paths really never crossed, other than just to be passing in hallways and that. As I made a statement, just recently, within this past year, he reached out to me on my cell phone, and he basically called me. I thought that was a joke in the beginning, but I thought someone was doing an impersonation, but it actually was him. But he had seen a video footage more recently of one of my matches with Owen Hart, and it's when he did the tombstone because he obviously that is the same move that Owen Hart did on Steve Austin that basically led to a lot of problems with Steve's neck, and Steve having to have surgery, and ultimately Steve having to leave the business. And he saw the same thing exactly happen to me. So one of the first words out of his mouth to me was, "Are you okay?" And I thought that was pretty nice that he wondered about my health and well-being. So I have a standing invite from him to, if I could make it out to, he said he's located somewhere in Texas. I just don't remember where offhand, but he said he'd love to have me on his podcast.
Oh, well, I hope that happens soon. Love to see that. Mike D wants to know, what was your relationship like with Vince McMahon?
Well, again, Vince was pulled in all kinds of different directions. When you're the president of an organization that you've got, let's say, probably close to 100, if not more than 100 employees under contract at all types of different levels. You've got multiple storylines taking place because athletes are getting hurt. I mean, he's got a lot going on. So I'll just say that he was always very cordial whenever we did interact with each other, but it was very, very limited. I had more dealings with creative teams and things of that nature.
Steve Ferraria wants to know, what wrestler do you think would have made a great MMA star?
Well, Steve Williams for one. I mean, it's he did not work for the. Well, no, he did work for the WWF at one point in time, but I think that was through his. It was going to be his introduction was through that Brawl for All, and because I mean, Steve was a football player slash amateur wrestler, and went to Oklahoma State University. Oh, excuse me, Oklahoma, and known as Dr. Death even then. So I mean, he kind of had this professional wrestler's personality even back then. So he worked predominantly overseas in Japan. So I think he would have done just fine. Again, just as one example.
Have you watched any of Bobby Lashley's MMA fights?
Yeah, well, again, Bobby. Again, I only made the one comment about Steve Williams with Bobby Lashley. Well, I mean, he has done well. He's a amateur wrestler, professional wrestler, cage fighter. So he's been in all three as well, and they're doing very well for himself.
Did you get along with Bob Holly?
Again, not a whole lot of interaction, but I got along with basically everybody. I didn't have no beefs with anybody.
What was your favorite takedown to do in amateur wrestling?
Favorite takedown? In amateur wrestling, I more or less forced the action to take place. Not many amateur wrestlers are skilled in the upper body techniques, body locks, headlocks, lateral throws. I would always threaten the athlete with an upper body technique, and because most amateur wrestlers are uncomfortable with it, they'll simply back out of it real quickly, and now they're forced to shoot. But in retrospect, that's what I wanted them to do in the first place. I wanted them to shoot in underneath me, so I'm going to sprawl on top of them. I'm going to keep them underneath me for a duration of time, so that I'm going to take a cardiovascular toll, thus taking a mental toll. Cardiovascular and mental aspects run hand in hand.
DJ Memphis Mix wants to know, how do you think Scott Steiner would have done in MMA?
Oh, would have done just fine. The Steiner brothers. I mean, they were from Bay City, Michigan. They wrestled at the University of Michigan. Were standouts there, so I'd have no doubt that they would have done just fine.
Gerardo wants to know, have you heard about the Undertaker saying that today's wrestlers are soft, and what's your opinion of that?
Well, I would say he's probably correct, but I would say I wouldn't limit it to just wrestlers. I would simply just go across the entire generation and just simply say that this generation is very weak, that is coming up. I think I could break most of them just by staring at them, and I'm not trying to say that to be mean, but they better be concerned about their futures. They better become a lot more aware of what's taking place, especially if you want to look at the political realm of things. They better become awakened so that they don't lose out.
Rodzor wants to know, what's your opinion on this COVID-19? He calls it bullshit.
Well, you said the right word. Just during this entire past year, now, is there an actual virus? I'm sure there is. In this past year alone, again, you and I have been able to talk about a lot of different things, even off the camera. This entire past year that we've had the coronavirus pandemic, not once has the common flu ever been talked about. To say that it has not been a big money grab is an understatement. It has been a big money grab. There is probably a coronavirus. It probably is an evil strain, but there's have been all kinds of other stuff. We've had the swine flu. There's been 2 or 3 other epidemics that have taken place. Nothing to this magnitude. And it is because of the cell phone. It is because of social media. It is because of all the media that is available to the common person. It's also because there are no longer any standards being held to our news reporters, our newspapers, our magazines, to people who are doing editorials. You had to do a retract. If you were caught wrong in a wrong statement, you had to come back. You had to apologize. You had to retract that statement, and you had to state something different. That is not what's happening. People are not being held accountable for their words and or their actions. And that's what Americans need to wake up to. I'm not trying to promote one political party after the other. Americans just simply need to wake up and hold all of our politicians to a higher standard, because they are supposed to be public servants. Their salary is paid by American taxes. Thus, they are our employees. And yet, they look down upon the common person. That's not the way the system works. America needs to wake up and put some people back in their place and make America, I'm not going to say make America great again. It was great before we've allowed politicians to lower our standards. America was the greatest country in the world, and there's a reason why foreigners come to the United States, because it's known as the land of opportunity. You better stand up and take note and grow a backbone and start making, again, politicians accountable for their actions.
Bios wants to know if you've ever been in a bar fight.
No.
I bet too many people didn't want to mess with you with your reputation.
Again, but it's, I was actually closer to get into a fight probably in the last, I'll say, 20 or 30 years of my life than I was in the first couple decades. Only because I was doing appearances a little bit later in the evening at some of these sports bars. Some of their patrons had partaken of a couple too many of these barley pop libations. And now they would start to say things like, well, I thought you'd be bigger. Well, you don't look so tough. Well, you're right like a girl because it's electrical. So, they would try to get a rise in me, and it's kind of going. There was only on a couple of occasions I would take out a business card, I'd write a phone number, and I'd slide it over to them. And like, what's this? I go, that's the phone number to the UFC. And I said, because there's the thing called a referee, and he's going to pull me off of you once you've had enough. Out in the public sector, there is no referee. There is no tap out. You don't know what you got in your pockets. Or I should say, I don't know what you got in your pockets. You don't know what I've got in my pockets. The era of mano a mano, we have a disagreement, we step outside, we thump each other, and come back in, have a drink, and bygones be bygones. That era is long gone. We don't have enough men that have that type of integrity whatsoever anymore. Nowadays, you get if I got the best of you, you're going to try to find someone else who's bigger and badder that to come and do your dirty work for you, or you're going to go get your gun or whatever other type of apparatus you need to become the equalizer. So there's my little rant rave about that.
Robert Lester wants to know if you were ever bullied as a kid.
Not ever really bullied. I mean, I was actually a quiet person. I did get put into a situation where a gang was basically, coming in on me, and I basically had to retaliate. I had to retaliate back. So again, I'd say that's probably the one and only time I was ever in a fight. But that wasn't even one-on-one. That was one against, I don't know, 6, 8, or 10 individuals. All I know is It was kind of like, I remember, I think my father had to come up to pick me up, and I'm down at the nurse's station here. I'm still kind of crying, boo-hoo and stuff like this, and yet there was like, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 of the boys. They were all battered up, and they were being attended, and I think the principal literally was trying to hold back a smirk and laugh because he's looking at this chunky little, because I was a little chunkier, and I had a flat top, this chunky little flat top kid who's out there balling, basically tore up half a dozen other actually one grade ahead of me. So I think he had a hard time keeping a straight face, trying to reprimand me for what I was doing. In the same token, he was probably happy for a fact. There was a point in time when standing up for your rights was the right thing to do, but now we're such a soon happy society. Again, more neutering of America.
Rad Rob Gaming wants to know what happened with the podcast you were doing with Don Fry that was going to be called The Realest Guys in the Room.
Well, again, it has a different name to it. Tenacious Masculinity, I think, is the last name. I was with Don last weekend, and we shot, I think, a couple hours worth of material that is being edited, and it will be starting to be released soon. And I think somewhere in the next week or so, we'll be doing another couple interviews to have more content, so that when we're ready to launch, that we have enough stuff in the can. The biggest thing is going to be the fact that I'm not going to be in town to do a regular podcast. I'm still going to be out doing what I do. So wherever I'm at, I will have either the microphone and or camera set up to where here Dance, I'm back in Stillwater, Oklahoma, or I'm back in Coldwater, Michigan, or I'm back in Columbus, Ohio. I'll be reporting from some other location, and Beast is on loose, and this is what he's doing here today.
Fart Doctor says, would you
What
fight?
was his name?
Fart Doctor. Would you fight?
I don't think as a doctor you want to be that kind of a doctor, but okay,
No.
Go ahead.
Would you ever do a rematch with Hoist Gracie?
Well, we've answered that before. Yes. In the last 2 years, I was trying to get one more match between Mark Coleman, Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, all right in a row, and I just wanted to make sure that I wanted both them and myself to be drug tested that night, simply just to let people know that Dan Severn is still lifetime chemical free. And I'd like to find out would they pass a drug test.
Adam G wants to know, did you think it was cheap that Gracie was using the gi in the early UFCs?
No, I mean, it was the rules were you could grab clothing. It was the sheer fact that their background was jiu-jitsu, so the fact that they had been working with a gi on all along, I mean, is that an advantage to them? I don't know. I mean, the sheer fact is you can't punch, kick, elbow, or knee in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, so there's still other things that people could have done. So, I mean, I don't look at it as a pro, or I don't look at it as a con.
TNT Takeover wants to know if you have any Danny Hodge stories or thoughts on him. He passed away recently.
No, again, it's a great piece of American heritage. Passed away with a Danny Hodge. I've had the pleasure of meeting Danny Hodge several times over the years. The first time was actually back in 1976, after I had hurt my knee, and I was still at the NCAA tournament because I had pinned 5 out of the 6 NCAA place finishers that year, and I was still at the NCAA tournament to at least see what was happening, and that's when I met Danny Hodge, and he even told me at that time that there was a book that was released. The book was released. It was known as the title was Two Guys Named Dan. It was based upon Dan Hodge and Dan Gable, but because they were waiting to see what was going to happen through the rest of my freshman career, because they were looking at having the book renamed Three Guys Named Dan, and I was going to be the 3rd edition. So I thought that was great that he told me that, and even Mike Chapman, one of the greatest probably authors when it comes to writing books about amateur wrestling, professional wrestling, and even a few other books. I think he's got, I'll say, well over 30 books to his credit. He has, has regaled me in turning amateur wrestling into a martial art in the course of just one night.
Disneyland Toys says, would you have any hesitation about fighting CM Punk?
Um, you mean a fight for real? No. Again, you're looking at how much younger is CM Punk than me. I mean, I would want a little bit of time, and I'm getting to that point of time and age. It's kind of like going, I've been retired for several years right now. I continue to train. I continue to conduct seminars. Even the group I was with last night, they were shocked as to how my mind still thinks, and as I'm just watching them what they're doing and looking for things that they're not doing. They're not exploring a lot of other options. They need to use a little bit more of their imagination.
Gaming with Rob wants to know if you think you would have won the Brawl for All if you had continued on with it.
Um, in boxing, no. And boxing is not my forte. Striking is not my forte. Now, had it been mixed martial arts where grappling, submissions, locks would all be thrown into it, well, that's a whole different category. But strictly the Brawl for All, that was strictly a boxing event and not really meant for me.
Cyrus 747 says you had the most menacing entrance music ever. How did you like it?
Well, again, I had no say so in what they prepared. I'll simply say that, like the first time getting ready to enter into the ring or go through the curtains for WWF. Um, I mean, I heard the music play. I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool music. I mean, so I'll just say that I really appreciate the music that they put together for me.
Robert Lester wants to know who was the strongest person that you fought in UFC and WWE, either one or
I mean,
both.
when it comes, I think I probably met a few more people when it comes to professional wrestling that were really powerful individuals. But then that's because a lot of them were utilizing. Or again, in professional wrestling, it's there's a lot of it's visual. So a lot of these guys they do a lot of training, and a lot of them were taking steroids and other chemicals to really enhance their body to trim off body fat, to where a lot of professional wrestlers look like bodybuilders. And not only did they look like bodybuilders, but a lot of these professional wrestlers are just incredibly strong. So there's actually too many that fall into that category that they had the physique, but then they had the wherewithal inside that gym to do things.
Joe Beck wants to know if you ever talked to Eric Bischoff.
No, I mean I did. There was a point in time when WCW was trying to bring me in, and I think I might have seen Eric at um, one of these WrestleFest slash what's the word I'm looking for, that they bring all these professional wrestlers to these not signings but oh, I don't know.
Reunions.
Well, not even a reunion, but they just they'll just they'll set up these different types of show slash fan fest slash events where you just there's a lot of wrestlers that come out that are no longer competitors, and it's just a chance for them to set up various tables and to interact with the folks.
Kaled Adam wants to know your thoughts on Triple H.
I don't know really what to say there. I mean, Triple H. I'll say that the novelty when he was first wrestling, that he was involved into the one organization between him and Road Dogg and I might drop the last third member's name right now.
Billy Gunn, the Road Dogg, X-Pac.
X-Pac. I mean, they had their own little group right there that they come out, and it was good. I mean, Road Dogg actually did great introductions. They had the little X-Pac. They're doing the old suck it signal and stuff like that. So, I really don't have any thing to say, I guess, other than the fact that when you start dating the boss's daughter, well, you probably are going to come underneath a great deal of scrutiny, so you better mind your P's and Q's at that point.
Jay Miller wants to know your thoughts on the Lion's Den match and the Dungeon match, which you were a referee for both of those.
Well, again, it was, I had a lot of fun, and I'll say the Dungeon match, because that was actually held at the Hart residence. So the whole time that the film crew was down in the basement, and they were trying to set up lights and sound and cameras and trying to put together the type of match. It was easy for me to just be the referee, but I really enjoyed those couple hours sitting up in the living room and listening to Stu Hart tell Stu Hart stories, and him asking me different questions. Some people must have told him a little bit about me because he was asking me a little bit about my shooting background and that, and they really enjoyed knowing other shooters. And that was, come to find out that all the professional wrestlers he had, they could both wrestle and also work matches. So they had dual ability.
John Bully Layfield wants to know what you thought about your match with The Rock at King of the Ring 1998.
I think it was the first time I actually had wrestled The Rock. I'm trying to think, previously, was that just with The Rock, or was it with the Nation and Domination also jumping in as well? Because I did have, I ended up, Rock was all part of that Nation and Domination. And so there was also D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and The Godfather, and Farouk were all members of that. And so, I mean, it was like I was taking on, I think, 4 or 5 men all in the same night, being splashed like by Mark Henry and that. So again, it was, I mean, he's gone off to use his professional career now, and he's killing it in the film industry.
Jack Jerry wants to know if you've ever wrestled in Mexico.
Yes, been to Mexico a couple times.
Dan the Man Smith wants to know if you've wrestled in the UK.
Yes. I think I've wrestled. I think I've done an MMA match. I think I've even done a submission grappling match. I've even conducted a couple of seminars, but it's been a while. And let's face it, nothing has happened this past year. I've had, again, because people were locked down, a lot more people were jumping on social medias. I've added a lot more people as friends to my database. And I've had a number of inquiries that all we're simply doing is waiting for the green light. And I'll try to set up some seminars, speaking engagements to take me back to the UK, just like the same way trying to go back to Russia or to go back to a number of other countries. Ireland, is another place I like to see, and Australia. These are just places I'd like to see at least one more time, one more hurrah.
Jack Jerry wants to know your thoughts on would The Undertaker have made it in MMA?
I have no idea what Mark's background was other than being a professional wrestler. So just because someone is a professional wrestler does not transfer well over into a different field whatsoever. So I know some of the professional wrestlers that we talked about in the past, they would have done just fine. But again, I don't know what Mark's background was before and if that would have transferred over well.
Zachary Carter says you're in better shape than half the WWE roster.
That's sad for the WWE roster then, because I'm a 62-year-old Bart heading towards 63, but I do try to train almost on a daily basis and doing something, and I do try to watch what I eat most of the time. Before this coronavirus happened, I do have kind of a Achilles heel for the occasional buffet.
Last question here because my phone's going to die. Sorry, fans. And by the way, we're also recording this for his full shoot interview with a high quality camera and sound. So the version of this on the full shoot will be a little bit higher quality, but I thank you for all your questions.
I do too, as well. So as people tell, if you ask me a question, you're going to get a pretty good answer, a thorough answer, usually with a story behind it, and probably will equate to even additional questions.
There's a fan asking if people use your name for unauthorized material, what do you generally do about it?
Well, no, I try to seek that out and find that out and shut people down because they should not be doing that. I mean, the UFC, I mean, they'll go after you really quite really boldly. They'll come after you because they want to make an example because they don't want to be missing out on their, you're taking money out of the UFC's pocket, same way as you're taking money out of my pocket.
And last question here. What was the pay like in UFC when you started? Obviously, it was less than they make now.
No, yeah, definitely. Well, again, if you go back, 20, 30 years in any professional career, what did baseball players, football players, hockey players, what did they make, 20, 30 years ago as to what they're making today? It varies a great deal. Sure. I mean, I always tell people that my guarantee to walk in that octagon cage the very first time was $1,000. And for $1,000, I signed a contract that, in fine print at the bottom, stated, in the event of your accidental death. Now, let's see. Only two things you couldn't do was bite an opponent or stick a finger in the eye gouge. And even then, it wasn't grounds for disqualification. They simply might just go after your purse. So there's a lot of other ways you could have taken another human being's life without ever violating those two rules. But I still signed it and I moved ahead, knowing that if I got in trouble, I could do this thing called tap, or I could simply look up at the referee and go, hey, Big John, I've had enough fun for the night.
This is a good question, so I will throw this one in from Colonel Quayle.
Oh, Colonel Quayle.
What do you think about neck cranks? Because I'll be honest, I do them in grappling and people bitch about it, but they work.
Well, they do. I mean a neck crank is a three. I've done the same in submission grappling, whether it's a choke, whether it's a crank, or it's a combination of both. So it just again depends on the competition, and it depends on what are the rules to this competition.
And favorite arena